I was obsessed with ramen. So I would go to these ramen shops and I would watch, and I didn't even understand what was going on. Ramen was different. Hi, I'm Ivan Orkin. I'm at Ivan Ramen in Farringdon in London. How exciting, yeah? How did ramen get created? That's like a super long question. Obviously it has, or maybe not so obviously, it has Chinese origins. It probably started becoming really popular in Japan in the 1950s. And then of course the instant ramen was started around that, and maybe in the 60s, and sort of the idea of ramen and this easy, simple dish sort of became well known. Ramen started to really become a cult status thing. As people visited Japan, it sort of took off around the world. I'm gonna be making Shoyu ramen today. It's a dish that I've been making since I opened in Tokyo, gosh, almost 20 years ago. So let's talk about how this dish is made. We're gonna add our broth, have our bowl. I'm gonna put our ingredients in here. I have my Shio Tare. So if you don't start with a really well-made, delicious broth, it's sort of, the whole dish is sort of dead on arrival. This is a Shio Tare that we actually also use in our Shoyu ramen. It has a lot of aromatics in it, and oil that helps the broth stick to the noodles. It adds a lot of depth of flavor. Some chicken fat. This is our roasted chicken fat. It's really, really nice. It ends up, you know, there's chicken broth in our ramen as well, so it helps to sort of deepen that chicken flavor. In the background, it's not a chicken ramen, so it blends in really nicely. And this is our Shoyu Tare. It's really dark, so it's hard to see exactly what it is, but it's a nice blend of shoyu. It's really nice. It just gives this very, very lovely perfumed flavor of soy. Even though, you know, ramen is street food, it's something that's relatively inexpensive, maybe not so much anymore, but it's still relatively inexpensive. And you might think it's just, you know, something super simple. It's not. Mistakes people make when they make the broth, there's not necessarily a wrong way. Some broths are really delicious when the temperature's not that high, and others are really delicious when it's boiling away for hours and hours. And it just sort of depends on what your goal is for your broth. We have our fancy noodle cooker that's gonna really agitate the noodles and cook them correctly. We're gonna go ahead and drop our noodles. So these are my rye noodles. When I opened Ivan Ramen in Tokyo, I made this sort of crazy decision to make all my noodles in-house. And I bought a fancy noodle machine, and I got really geeky and nerding out making noodles all the time. It was really, really fun. We now work with a great company, Sun Noodle, that makes our noodles for us, and together we developed the recipe using their, you know, professional machines. But the noodle recipe is still pretty close to what I served in Japan. I'm very proud of them. They're really delicious. They have a small bit of rye flour in them to give them an extra bit of flavor when you chew on the noodles. Even though they're quite thin, they have a lot of firmness and chewiness that I think makes for a really, really great eating experience. So we're gonna drop these in very quickly, 40 seconds. Hit my little timer here. Having free-flowing water that's boiling hard, mixing the noodles and making sure they agitate and move is incredibly important. Otherwise, they don't really cook properly. And then shaking out all the water. It seems like it's a show-off thing, and it is a little bit, but why work really hard to make a perfect broth and then dump, you know, a whole bunch of water in with your noodles? All right, so let's garnish this. We have this all before you now. We have our chashu. There's some roasted tomato, which is something that I sort of one of my signature ingredients. When I opened the shop in Japan, I had an oven because I really wanted an oven, and I had to think of how to use my oven. And I wanted to find a really interesting umami bomb. And tomatoes have a lot of natural umami, and I think they also have an acidity that cuts the fat and the salt a little bit. And it's one of my great ideas for me. And I really love it. Some onions, which often go in a bowl of ramen, and a ramen egg, which for me is always my favorite part of the ramen. What makes a great bowl of shoyu ramen? At the end of the day, building a bowl of ramen, a good bowl of ramen in my mind is very harmonious. So all the different ingredients that go into a bowl all have to kind of balance together. A bad bowl doesn't balance. A good bowl, you know, once again the tare, the fat, and the broth. Those ingredients are very important to make sure that broth is really delicious. The noodles have to match the broth. That might sound strange to you, but if the noodles don't match the broth, then a lot of times you can tell. And when you slurp the noodles, the flavor doesn't stick to the noodles, or the noodles somehow feel out of place. My ramen, I've always felt the toppings should not distract from the broth and the noodles, and so I've always sort of under-seasoned my toppings. I don't want extremely sweet eggs and chashu and things that are so flavor-packed that you end up missing the flavor of the noodles and the broth. So I've always been a little bit more of a minimalist chef for ramen. And when I first started making ramen, really intensely flavored ramen was what was extremely popular. Recently, more clean tasting ramen has become popular. When I started, my ramen was considered extremely light. And nowadays, there's a lot of ramen that's a lot lighter than mine. So that's our shoyu ramen. Incredibly satisfying. It's in one bowl. It's fun to eat. Believe it or not, there's actually a real way to eat ramen. Now, once you've paid for your bowl, you can do whatever the hell you want. I guess I don't really give a shit. But if you really want to enjoy it, just like in New York, if you eat your pizza with a knife and a fork, I'm going to laugh at you. You want to pull out from the bowl because it's all piled in there, right? If you try to eat it while it's still in the bowl, it's hard to slurp. And what I like to tell people is when you drink coffee in the morning, you know, you don't wait for it to cool all the way down, right? You kind of slurp it into your mouth because you really want that coffee. Ramen's the same thing. You kind of want to inhale it on a cushion of air into your mouth. And then you chew on it once it's in your mouth. I know a lot of people sort of eat a little bit and kind of chew on it and let it drop. That's fine, but it's really more fun once it's all in your mouth. You get to chew it, and then you can sip some of it, and you can eat some of your toppings and repeat. Believe it or not, ramen has not always been like crazy like it is now, and this was just sort of starting, and I was obsessed with ramen, so we were eating in shops, you know, a couple days a week, and even though I was a chef and I knew a lot about cooking, clearly, ramen was different. In French cooking, that's my background, we clean up soups and we make consommes and make these very fine-tuned broths, whereas in ramen, they're a little dirtier, they're richer, and then you're adding all this crazy stuff, and I didn't even understand what was going on. So I would go to these ramen shops and I would watch, and I would peer over the counter, and they would be adding ladles of things, but I didn't know what it was they were adding. I just started to get really obsessed. And so when I decided I wanted to open a restaurant in Tokyo, but I still didn't really know what kind of restaurant I wanted. After my wife and I had many heated discussions, and she kept recommending opening a ramen shop, which I thought was crazy because I didn't know how to make ramen and I didn't really want to work in a ramen shop. And to tell you the truth, back then, an American guy working in a ramen shop was not really possible. Maybe nowadays, but back then, 20-something years ago, no. But you know what? Chefs are meant to figure shit out, and I did.